Hi kids, it's Mrs. Fravel. How are you? Good, I'm fine. Thanks for asking. Hey, so this is the first presentation in our new unit on ecology. So this is unit 2, the principles of ecology. Really quickly, I just want to go through a few new things that you will learn in this unit. You should have already watched the phenomenon launch video on the wolves of Yellowstone and done your initial claim for that. And then today we're going to talk about what the specific parts, the big general parts of an ecosystem are, okay? All right, here we go. So what is ecology? Ecology is the branch of science that studies the interactions of organisms and where they live. And there's two major parts to an ecosystem. Okay? An ecosystem is the interaction of biotic and abiotic elements in any given area. And that any given area thing is pretty loosely defined. We can call an ecosystem in a big area, like Yellowstone National Park is one giant interconnected ecosystem, but also within that big ecosystem, there are smaller ecosystems. So just the river in Yellowstone is its own ecosystem. Just Yellowstone Lake is its own ecosystem. All of the fields and plains where it's grassy, those are all ecosystems in Yellowstone National Park. And each of the hot springs is its own ecosystem as well. Okay, so when we talk about an ecosystem, it really just for an ecologist is what are they studying? What exact area are they looking at? Okay, and that just depends. So within each ecosystem, we have two major elements, the biotic elements, and those are all of the living organisms. And we talked in the last unit about what a living organism is. So you all know how to recognize those. They all have the same 7 characteristics, right? Okay. The other part of an ecosystem is made up of all of the abiotic factors. So this is everything in an ecosystem or in an environment that is not alive, that doesn't have those characteristics of living things. And it includes stuff like the temperature, the climate, the weather, which are two different things. We'll go through those another time. It also includes the water, the geology, what kind of earth forms are there, and its location on the planet. It also includes a whole host of other things that I'll go through in just a sec, okay? But for now, I want you to go explore your ecosystem. Go outside. We're going to go outside in class, and I would like you to put this video on pause, take a piece of paper and a pencil with you, and write down, go outside for 20 minutes. You can sit quietly, preferably somewhere that has some natural features. You can sit quietly, you could go on a hike, go on a walk, but again, try to go where there's some natural stuff. And make note of all of the biotic and abiotic factors you observe. So hit pause on me now, and I will see you in 20 minutes, okay? Come back and start this up again. Okay, so I hope you saw some really interesting things while you were outside. I hope you saw some birds. Birds are migrating right now, so hopefully you saw some. I hope you saw some plants. What else might you have seen that were biotic and abiotic? So this picture right here is a picture taken from a wildlife camera in Yellowstone National Park. And I just wanted to take a second, maybe point out the abiotic and biotic factors. And then if you need to go add to your list that you wrote down outside, you can certainly do that, because sometimes we are looking at living things and not knowing that they're living things or that there are living things there. And sometimes we don't think about certain things as being a significant abiotic factor. Okay, so here's what I see in this picture. So biotic features first, I see the wolves. They've caught a bison. So bisons are living things, right? There are some plants. There's grasses and small bushes. There are some lichens on the rocks on that ground. I guarantee it. And lichens are a living thing. What else do I see that's living? Are those? I don't know. This picture's not great. There might be some coyotes or rabbits back there too. Okay, so those are the major biotic things that I can see. What I can't see as well is what's living in the soil. Okay, so as I look at the soil, other biotic features that aren't immediately visible but are there are things like invertebrates in the soil, like worms and insects. There's also a lot of bacteria and natural viruses that are in the soil. Okay, so those are things to think about as well. Possibly in the air, in terms of biotic factors, there might be pollen flying from plants or flowers, all kinds of things. Okay? So remember, it's not just the big megafauna and big plants that we see. It's the tiny things too that we don't see that are also biotic factors. Okay? Abiotic factors, non-living stuff in this picture I can see right here. I can see snow. That's a water feature. I can see rocks, right? Those are an abiotic factor. And then the soil itself is made up of abiotic compounds. Okay? It has living things in it like the worms and bacteria, but soil itself is made of non-living rock, which is all ground up. What else? Oh yeah, these guys are breathing, right? So the abiotic factor here would also be the air around them. And what else? I bet it's pretty cold, seeing as how there's still snow on the ground. So that temperature right there is also an abiotic factor. Also, it's sunny. The sunlight, how much sunlight they are getting. And that is stuff that if you break it apart, sunlight is the light that we can see. It's also the light we cannot see. It's light that comes through in UV rays, which is ultraviolet, which is the stuff that gives you a sunburn, and IR waves, which are infrared, that's heat. Okay? So remember, abiotic and biotic is all kinds of factors that you might not think of or see right away. Okay, as part of your assignment today, what I would like you to do is you're going to go onto Canvas after we're done here, and you're going to answer you're going to answer this question, the pictures on the discussion question, and then also see if you could come up with a scientific experiment an ecologist could do to figure out what's going on with these wolves and these bison. Okay, good. So a little bit more on how ecosystems work. Organisms depend on other organisms, and they also depend on the non-living abiotic factors in their environment for survival. And again, ecology is a job. It is a scientific discipline, and the scientists study the relationships among and between living things, as well as the relationship that living things have with their environment. Okay? It's a huge, really fun branch of science. You get to be outside almost all the time. Okay, so how are organisms tied to their ecosystem? Organisms are physiologically adapted to their environment's abiotic structure. That's where they are supposed to be. And they rely on having a consistent range of temperature. It's not that it has to be the same temperature all the time, but they are adapted to exist at a certain low temperature and a certain high temperature, and that there is a range within there. And if the temperature of an ecosystem starts to change long term, if the climate begins to change, either to get colder or get warmer, some organisms may not be able to tolerate that, and they might actually go extinct, or they will start to migrate to find a new ecosystem, or they will need to adapt genetically. And we're going to talk about that in in evolution. Excuse me. Another major influence on how organisms survive is pH and salinity, and this is mostly for aquatic environments. So freshwater and saltwater both, they have a certain level of acidity and alkalinity. That's what pH is. And then salinity is how salty is the water. Freshwater organisms cannot live in salty water. Saltwater organisms cannot survive in freshwater because their bodies are adapted to deal with the specific ranges of salinity that they are adapted to. Okay, and they have ways of coping with that don't translate to the other ecosystem. And then they're also tied to each other in terms of their food sources. Are they eating plants? What plants are they eating? What if those plants go extinct in their area? What do they do then? Their feeding strategies. Are they filter feeders? Are they grazers? Are they predators? How do they eat? And of course, they're tied to the other organisms in terms of competition or predation. And we're going to talk about that next week. Okay. Also, the weather and the climate. And let's make sure you guys know the difference between the two. Weather is short-term what's going on in the environment in terms of precipitation and temperature. So weather we track by the day, by the week, by the month, and by the year. So Utah's weather today, as I look outside, it's Friday, September 18th, and it's windy and about 90 degrees, okay? September this year has been pretty warm. It's been in the 90s for most of the month. This year, 2020, I don't know what the weather's been. I've been in quarantine. I'm just kidding. It's been above average for Utah for this year, for 2020. Okay, so we talk about weather on those shorter term time blocks. Climate, totally different. Climate is all of the weather averaged over 30 years. Okay. So climate is 30 years long term. We look at the average temperatures, average precipitations, and then take those measurements to say this is the climate that we have. You in Utah live in a desert climate, and that has to do with how much precipitation we get, the vegetation that we have, and also the altitude that we're at. Okay, if any of those things change over the next 30 years, we will have a different climate. Okay, so make sure you know those two things are very different and they both really influence how organisms function in their ecosystem. Okay, now what are things made of? Abiotic factors can be made of all kinds of things. They might be made of atoms and elements, or they aren't made of atoms and elements or molecules at all. Some examples of non-molecular factors are the light, UV, IR, and visible light, radiation, and temperature. So those aren't made of molecules. They just are physical facts, right? Inorganic molecules are found in the wind, humidity, water, pH, metals, gases, soil chemicals. So those are inorganic molecules, meaning they aren't used by living things, okay? That's what composes the rocks, the soil, all of that stuff, okay? And then climate and weather also are large factors to influence the geographic location and the geography as an abiotic factor. Okay? Okay, so then what are living things made of? CHNOPS! I'm going to give you a minute. What do you think CHNOPS stands for? Okay. In these molecules, these pictures of molecules, I want you to look at the letters and tell me what elements you see, and an element is denoted by these little letters. Okay, so as you look at it, you can see C's, those are carbon, H, those are hydrogens. What else do we have? We have some O's, those are oxygen. Okay, so these are all representations of molecules, how they're put together, and these are all organic molecules. We have fats, phospholipids. This is another fat. These are steroids, which is a kind of fatty acid. Okay, so these are all organic molecules made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So that's 3 of those letters. The other 3 are nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. So these are the 6 most common elements found in living tissues, what living things are made of. You are made of these things, okay? So these interact and bond with each other to build living tissues and also build proteins and enzymes that run living things metabolism. And if you were here, I would have you discuss, what do you think the most important element is? It's oxygen, okay? All right, so your assignments for today, because I'm going to run out of time on this little screencast, your assignments today are on Canvas. You should be able to hit the next button. I'm going to post another video. You should have watched it before this, on how to navigate this unit in Canvas. So make sure you understand that. Reach out if you need. I hope you are well and happy.